Well, we're talking a little hoops today. Believe it or not, the NBA season starts before you know it. I mean, here we are talking golf, we're talking football, we're talking baseball, potentially the playoffs, who's going to be in. And let's not forget the NBA. And our next guest is a guy I've known forever, and Chuck Cooperstein is embarking, I think, on his 20th season of being the play-by-play voice of the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, Chuck, first off, it's awesome to see you. 20 years? Am I right on that?
20. This will be 20 this year.
Wow.
Yeah, my first year, the Mavericks went to the NBA Finals and lost to Miami. And, we played into the middle of June and think, well, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be all the time, right? Doesn't quite work out that way.
Well, I mean, you went from the Dirk era, which was an incredible era, and now the Luka era. I mean, yeah, and there were some down teams, sure. Every team goes through that, especially when you have 2 decades of action. But, I mean, you're pretty lucky, Chuck. You've seen some pretty awesome basketball.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world, okay? I will be the first to tell you that. First off, because both guys they're just really good people, number one. And secondly, there are so many people in our business that never get the chance to work with and broadcast a superstar. And I've always had one.
Yeah.
And I've always had that feeling of every night for basically 20 years walking into that building and wondering what is going to happen tonight. What is that guy going to do tonight that's going to just blow me away, and as a result, hopefully for what I call blow fans away.
Yeah, I mean, you're a fan, and you hear it on the air, and I urge all the people watching, if you've never heard Chuck call a game, man, he gets into it. And he got into it when I knew him at the University of Florida, and he gets into it now, so you haven't lost that enthusiasm, which is really neat, Chuck. Hey, what is it like, though, and this is one of these questions you probably gotten a million times over the years. What's it like hanging out with Mark Cuban? I mean, he obviously loves the game very, very much, and the Mavs are his team.
Well, they're not his team anymore.
Okay.
He sold the team back in December, right. So he's got a minority stake in it, but he's not involved in the day-to-day operation of it. And frankly, I didn't have day-to-day contact with Mark, but Mark was always very, very supportive of me. And on many levels, and I was always really and have been extraordinarily thankful for that. He's an interesting guy. He's got a lot of opinions, some of which you agree with, and some of which you don't. But that's okay, right? That's what makes the world go round. But all I can say is that he's been extremely kind to me, and I will always have a very soft spot in my heart for him.
Well, I mean, he's still visible at the games, loves the game very, very much. And of course, when he made his fortune, he had that .com site where you could hear all the play-by-play of all the colleges. And he's the big Indiana Hoosiers guy.
He literally was, 20 years ahead of his time with the concept of broadcast.com. I mean, just think today how we operate in the audio and video space. And he's the guy that's responsible for that.
Yeah, pretty amazing when you think about it. All right, we're embarking on another NBA season. But let me ask you this before we talk hoops specifically, because you're an Irving, Texas guy. You've been there for a long, long time, you and your family. And you've seen all the great stars, whether it's the Cowboys or the Rangers or the Stars, I mean, whoever, right? I mean, who's bigger today, Chuck? I mean, and I'm a golf guy. Scottie Scheffler, Dak, or Luka? I mean, who's carrying the torch now of popularity in Big D?
It's a good question. I think Luka probably, because there are fewer haters of Luka in Dallas. The haters, the haters of Luka come from outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Dak is a polarizing figure just because the Cowboys are a polarizing team, and Jerry Jones is a polarizing owner, and you have one very good week like they had against the Browns, and one absolutely awful week like they had against the Saints. And it's the fan base is just beside itself. They just don't know what to think anymore. And I think people like Scheffler very much. I mean, what's not to like about him? But golf is the type of thing that is it's a niche. And listen, you and I and people who play and who watch this pretty much our whole lives. We look at him with absolute amazement. I would still say, as proficient as Scheffler is in his sport, I'll still say Luka is probably the best athlete we have here going now. But time will ultimately, excuse me, will tell the story on that. But what Scheffler did this year was, it was remarkable. I think, and I'm doing this in real time here, so just thinking about things. The fact that golf has changed so much. Full fields don't exist very often. He took advantage of a lot of that. A lot of his success came in limited field events, and as we know, there are the greats of the great, but there are enough great players on both the PGA Tour and on the LIV Tour that at any point, someone, if he's playing in a full event, has the chance to jump up and win. I mean, there are just too many of those guys out there. So Scheffler has taken advantage of a tremendous situation for him. Having said that, his play is absurdly spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And I guess we could have thrown Bryson DeChambeau in the mix. I mean, he lives in Dallas,
right. Well, no,
went to SMU.
He's great. He just he sold his place in Dallas. He's building a huge monument to himself and his family in Grapevine on the lake, and he's been great. And his the 180 with him and how people perceive him really since the U.S. Open win has been incredible. I did not see that coming. And I'm not a big YouTuber, so I don't spend a lot of time on
right.
there, watching various shows, and it just doesn't cross my mind to do that. But the fact that he has been as successful as he's been doing that, and in many ways, introducing golf to a whole new generation of young people who might not ordinarily take up the game or follow the game, it's the best thing that could have possibly happened to golf.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I guess we left out the baseball guys. I mean, Pudge Rodriguez, Nolan Ryan, my distant cousin Buddy Bell. I mean, the list goes on and on.
I think you were talking in present tense. Too,
yes, so. Present tense, exactly. But as you were talking, I said, I'm leaving some people out. But then again, sports in Dallas, we could have a show for 9 hours and never mention everybody. All right, let's talk hoops, because it was exciting last year as the Mavs made it to the finals. Obviously, the Celtics are loaded and showed that in the final series. But Luka and Kyrie were spectacular, and now you throw Klay Thompson into the mix. He joins the ranks. I mean, how excited are you, Chuck? And how would that chemistry be with another shooter being involved in this threesome?
There will be no issues with chemistry. I mean, Luka and Kyrie are like brothers, and Kyrie was probably as responsible for recruiting Klay Thompson to come to the Mavericks as anyone. And the Mavericks, the knock on the Mavericks for years and years and years is, why won't a legitimate free agent, sign with the Mavericks? A high value, a big name, someone that everyone can recognize, somewhat in his prime, sign with the Mavericks. Now, people will argue that Klay is past his prime, because of the injuries that he's had. But all I know is that Luka's going to drive down the lane, and there are 2 or 3 people that are going to converge on him, and he's going to pass the ball out for a three-pointer. And with all due respect to Derrick Jones Jr., who had a heck of a year for the Mavericks and was really important to the Mavericks getting to the finals, he's passing the ball to Klay Thompson, for crying out loud. Klay Thompson, arguably one of the greatest catch-and-shoot three-point guys that this league has ever seen. And they're not going to just use Klay in that situation. I mean, that's the obvious one for all of us to look at. But they'll have him involved in screening actions and things like that just will make it far more difficult to defend. Because ultimately, the great thing about the playoffs is that your deficiencies are exposed. Now, I never would have thought going into the finals that having Luka Doncic, even in a somewhat diminished state because of his injuries,
right,
and Kyrie Irving. I would never have thought that offense would be a problem. And yet offense was a huge problem in the series, because in the 4 games the Mavericks lost, they never scored 100 points. I mean, how is that possible? They didn't lose because of their defense, and especially a lot of people chirping on Luka, saying he's a poor defender and whatnot. They didn't lose because of their defense. They lost because they didn't score enough, and they certainly weren't efficient enough from 3-point range when they took their shots. Well, you've got Klay Thompson there now, and that changes the dynamic all the way around.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a big Jason Kidd fan, and Chuck, you and I have been around a long time. I think I called a Jason Kidd game when he was playing at Cal back in college. That was a long time ago. But I do think he has matured as a head coach. Agree or disagree? I mean, I thought obviously did a great job last year.
No, he has, and I think one of the things that really helped him was when he went to the Lakers and was an assistant coach and worked for Frank Vogel and learned in many ways, how to work with superstars as a coach, because so many superstars, and Jason Kidd was that. I mean, he's one of the top, in the NBA's top 75 of all time. Too many coaches, great players, become bad coaches because they want their players to play like they play, but those players can't always do what they did. So. You have to learn how to work with those people, and when you're working with LeBron and with Anthony Davis on a day-to-day basis, I can't imagine how that wouldn't help you. So that when he got to Dallas, and making sure that the superstar was happy was absolutely paramount, because Luka and Rick Carlisle had kind of gotten sideways, and Rick kind of knew that, look, this was not going to end the way he wanted it to end. And we all know, if it comes down to the player or the coach, it's always the player that wins.
Of course.
But Jason immediately, as he said, we have the we have the answers to the test. That's what we want to provide for him, and then let him go and do what he's going to do. And so then Kyrie comes in a trade, and while the record didn't reflect it, those two actually did play well together. The Mavericks were a plus team with those two on the floor at the same time. There were a lot of other things that went wrong, and why they ultimately fell apart late in the season and didn't make the playoffs. But you had, Jason won Luka over, and you had Kyrie, who clearly, it was coming off of another wild situation this time in Brooklyn, but he had, as a kid, worn Jason Kidd's jersey. He had known the Mavericks general manager Nico Harrison from the time he was in high school, from the relationship with Nike, and he was not going to allow those two to fail. It was not going to happen. So, with those two in the corner of the head coach, especially. It's like, look, coaches survive in the NBA with support from their superstars. If you lose your superstar, you're done. It doesn't matter how smart you are, X's and O's wise. But Jason Kidd won those guys over, won them over early, and the result is 2 Western Conference Finals in his 3 years, and obviously a trip to the NBA Finals last year.
One more question about the NBA, because I do want to get a football comment or two from you. Hubie Brown, the great Hubie Brown, is going to finally be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he's back for another season. Chuck, he's 90 years old, right? The great Hubie Brown.
90 years old.
What
91 in the season.
What a treasure!
He is a true American treasure, and I will say it's. People ask, well, is there anything that you've not done in your business that you'd really like to do? Places that you've not worked at, or people that you've not worked with. I would love to have done a game with Hubie Brown. That would just be like, for me. Oh my goodness, that would just be the ultimate kid in the candy store.
Wow. He was the head coach of the Kentucky Colonels in the ABA with Artis Gilmore and Dan Issel and Louis Dampier.
Yep. Sure was.
Oh, me. And I can't wait to hear him this year. And really, if you listen to the broadcast, he is so knowledgeable, and he still breaks it down as good as any analyst, I think. And I'm not just saying that because he's who he is, but he's good.
He's not looking for the hot take.
Yeah.
He's watching the game. It's the ultimate, the play-by-play guy is telling you what happened, and the analyst is telling you why it happened. And on
Yes.
TV, it works even better because obviously the analyst he can talk because the picture is there, the score is there, the time is there. The play-by-play announcer doesn't have to get in the way in order to establish that like he does on radio.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I'm excited about the start of the season. Long season, but it does start up here in a few weeks. You'll be busy with the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, you live there in the great state of Texas. The Longhorns are now the #1 team in college football. Quinn Ewers out for a week or so with a strained abdomen. Arch Manning grabbing the headlines. And I read on X the other day your comments. ESPN coming out, maybe will Arch be the starter, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's preposterous. The other kid is outstanding. But, I mean, I guess Chuck, that's ESPN, that's college football, that's social media, right?
No, you know what? I don't think it's college football. I do think it's them having a particular philosophy from 7 in the morning until 6 or 5 at night when SportsCenter comes on in the Central Time Zone. This is what they want to do. And, I think there are people who really know what the story is. But because this is the mantra and the marching orders from above, that this is how we're going to approach these stories. And simply telling the story isn't good enough. We have to create something out of nothing. Frankly, it's why I'm not in talk radio anymore. And I gave up on it a long time ago because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to. Tell me what's happening today. Just tell me what's happening today, and let's move on from there. And I think college football fans generally would appreciate that type of approach. Certainly at Texas today, but name your school. Listen, Michigan's going through it right now, right?
Yeah.
They just changed quarterbacks. So, maybe there's a pretty good reason why they changed quarterbacks. Okay, because Davis Warren wasn't very good. Their offense wasn't moving very well. But Orgy can't pass. So what are they going to do? I mean, they're really between a rock and a hard place at quarterback. Texas it's an embarrassment of riches, and obviously with Arch Manning being in the family that he is in, people want to see him and they want to talk about him and whatever. But Quinn's the quarterback. Quinn's the leader of the team, and more importantly, Arch knows this. And he and Ewers are terrific together. Again, I'm not around that program every day, but from everything that I've seen and people that I trust who are around that program every day, that their relationship is fantastic, and nobody is going to try to drive a wedge, no one will be able to drive a wedge between them, even if they tried to drive a wedge between them.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun, and we know Ewers is back in the fold as soon as he's healthy, and they have a gimme coming up. And so in a couple of weeks, he'll be back when the schedule gets very interesting, needless to say, as Texas plays some very interesting road games in the SEC. All right, speaking of the SEC, Chuck and I actually graduated the same year from the University of Florida. And last week on Facebook, he sent all these awesome pictures that brought back so many great memories. I mean, Chuck, the broadcast college, you're rubbing elbows with the old ball coach, Steve Strickland, the AD had you over to the house. Now, the game was terrible. But going back to the alma mater, Chuck, was awesome.
Everything about that weekend was spectacular, and then 350 happened, and then it was a disaster.
But how much fun was it to get back to Gainesville? Because, listen, you and I, we were there as college kids. Obviously, the city's changed, as all college towns do. The football stadium's changed, but it's still our alma mater, Chuck, right?
You walk into that stadium, and I'll work from there backwards. But you walk into the stadium, and it's what you remember, and
yes.
Even with the expansion of the state, it's what you remember. And then everybody goes through their warm-ups. The band comes on the field. You hear the alma mater. You hear you hear the fight song, and they're marching, and you see Emmitt Smith do Mr. Two Bits.
Oh wow!
Now that they have Emmitt Smith, Emmitt's son is at A&M. Right,
I know.
he had transferred from Stanford to A&M, and all the traditions and that they just bring back the fuzzies, and frankly, even as I'm talking, I think there's some goosebumps that are on my arms and on the back of my neck. Florida was a really important place for me because it gave me everything that I could possibly have wanted from the college experience. Just a big school, big football school. Didn't always win, but the games mattered, and it mattered to people. I got to work for the basketball program my first 2 years there, and really, if my love for basketball hadn't already been developed, it became even deeper because of that. The College of Journalism was great. The opportunities that you and I had to do things that a lot of other people around the country don't get to do, and then see what they're doing today to make sure that the kids today have the same chances that you and I had. If we want to do something in this business, that the tools are there for us to really learn how to do it and put us in a position to succeed.
Well, and as we wrap it up, and you sent so many great pictures, but there were a bunch of them that I got the biggest kick out of. But Steve Russell, and listen, people listening may not know Steve. Maybe if you're a Gator fan, you do. Steve has been at the University of Florida forever on the radio, and he's done coaches shows and a zillion things. And when you put that picture up, and he's got the white beard going and everything, Chuck, but man, it was great to see Steve Russell. I haven't talked to him in so long, and what a terrific guy, and what a great broadcaster Steve Russell is. It still is.
He's doing great, and he's really become. He's on the staff now. I mean, I don't know that I can call him professor. I'm not sure that he is officially professor.
Right.
But he's. He was there when we were in school, and he had done Florida baseball before I did Florida baseball.
Wow.
My last year, and after he had left the college and actually gone out and gotten real work in the community, and but he's doing a phenomenal job, showing those kids the way and showing them to do it the right way. And it's always great to see him, and it's great to talk to him. I occasionally go on his talk show, and especially he loves the NBA, which in a college town it's kind of hard to talk about the NBA very much, but he does, and he likes it. So when the Mavericks were advancing as they were, we got together, and I told him I was coming to Gainesville in September for the A&M game. So it worked out great. And I will say this, the new dean. And I guess he's not really new anymore. Hub Brown, he came from Syracuse, and he may be the first dean I've ever been around that actually likes electronic as much, if not more, than he likes print.
Right.
And he's helped put the resources, behind electronic, and I think maybe in large part because print people have to be electronic people on some level today. And so it was a pleasure to talk to him, and it was just a fabulous experience. I highly recommend, even if you're not an alumni like me, where I am, to go to Gainesville for a game. It's really fabulous. You can't really go wrong in the SEC anywhere. Okay, I mean you really can't, but that place means a whole lot to me.
Yeah, and me too. And you spurred me to make some potential plans when I have a few weeks off in October. So looking forward to that. Well, Chuck, I appreciate it, my friend. Great to see you. Congratulations on 20 years behind the microphone for the Dallas Mavericks. I think that's awesome. And again, I said it earlier in our conversation, when I do get to hear you from time to time in my travels, the enthusiasm that you still exude is amazing, because you've been doing it a long time, my friend, and I know you love it, and it comes across still.
Well, if you're not going to sound like you love it, then why are people going to listen
Absolutely.
to you?
Absolutely.
You've got to be able to draw them in, and whether it's basketball or you're calling a 50-footer that rolls in on 16 on Sunday, right? You better nail it. You better give people the reason to listen to you, and that's always been my goal.
Well, Chuck, we appreciate it, my friend. Take care.
Appreciate you.